Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this month's View from the Mount. We're broadcasting live from Meditation Mount in a very hot Ojai Valley in Southern California. Like a lot of you, we've been experiencing extreme heat. And so today is, I think, a week of being over 100 degrees. And it just points to the fact that our planet is warming. And we're facing all these tests and all these challenges, and the crisis in front of us is of our own making. Our theme for today is building a bridge to the soul. I'd like to say that the need for the light of the soul to illumine and guide our every step, both individually, you and I, and also collectively, has never been greater. If you refer back to the Hindu cosmic calendar, they talk about the 4 ages, and we're coming to the end of the 3rd age, the age of Kali Yuga. And Kali Yuga is always the one that is the greatest testing. It's the time when things get dark. It's the opportunity to redeem the light and release it in matter. So this is where we face our own demons, our own shadows, individually, collectively, as we prepare to step into the 4th and final of this cycle of ages, which is the Satya, Kali Satya. So there are many reasons why this is such a very tense and opportune time. And therefore, the choice of the theme for me was obvious, because it's a time when all souls on deck. We're being asked to bring the light of our soul into daily life as a source of illumination, a source of warmth, and a source of sustenance, not just for ourselves, but for others. So the call of the soul, I believe, is an inner magnetic call. It's the compelling call that we sense, and I believe that each of us are responding to this. So during our time together, we'll be exploring the art and science of bridge building, building the bridge to the soul, and figuring out what is required from each of us to construct this lifeline to the inner sun of our sovereign self. So that's the journey we're going to go on together. But before we begin, I'd like us to come together, gather our forces, and create a field that is receptive, in which new impressions and insights can be received and registered. As we've mentioned before, it's not just what we bring to the table from the past, what I've read, what I've understood, what you've read and understood. We're here and now together. As we open ourselves, we can receive new insights together. So let's begin by taking a few deep, gentle breaths together. And we use this time of rhythmic approach to release any tension we may be holding first in our physical body. We release and relax. And as we breathe, we let go of any tension that may be stuck and lodged inside our emotional field. We release and enter into a state of centered calm. And continuing to breathe gently and deeply, we let go of any tension that may be held and imprisoned inside our mind. We release any extraneous thoughts and breathe in a state of serenity. So having relaxed and calmed the threefold earthly vehicle, let us now step into the silent space of our heart. And standing inside the heart, become aware of an eternal flame burning at its center. This is the inextinguishable fire of love, which is the essence of our true nature. And now we sense and we visualize lines of lighted love flowing out from our heart to touch the hearts of all who are gathered together today in virtual space, and also to touch the hearts of all those who will be watching the recording later. On the subtle realms, time and space do not exist as barriers. As we see these lines of lighted love flowing between us, they weave together a matrix of communion, a group chalice that can receive the outpouring of our soul. And now gently bring yourself back to this time, to this space, to this moment, as we embark upon our journey of inquiry. I'm going to present some material on the building of the Rainbow Bridge. It's not going to be complete. It's more of an introduction to it. And then we can dive deeper as we are called to do this. We will touch on some techniques, but I just want to offer a picture of not just what it is, but why it's necessary now and how we can go about it. But I want to start with a question, because a lot of us have been feeling rather tired recently. So I want to ask this question. Have you recently found yourself coming very close to running on empty and consequently declaring, I really need to stop and recharge my batteries? Things are going at such a pace that the batteries run down, just as our e-vehicles and smartphones need regular recharging because they don't have unlimited supply of power. So our personal lives can easily enter that same red zone and reach a point of depletion where the low battery sign flashes its warning. So I've begun to take naps in the afternoon, like a half-hour nap, and just that recharges me. It's not just a sign of getting older. It's actually a technique that's very useful, like a power nap, if you want to call it that. So in today's environmentally aware world, many people are switching to solar power. They're using photovoltaic cells on the roofs of their houses to capture the free energy of the sun. And so I'd like to propose that we have the same possibility of capturing the power of the inner sun, the soul. And by doing this, we bypass the need for external batteries. So the question is, how do you install solar power at an individual level? And this is where we come back to meditation. Because it's long been understood that through the practice of daily meditation, a bridge of resonance can be established between the soul and the personality that fashions a channel through which the power of the one life can flow and circulate through the whole ecosystem of self. The ecosystem of self is that personal micro-universe for which we have primary responsibility. So the building of this connection is what the ageless wisdom teaching refers to as the building of the Antakarana, or rainbow bridge that connects heaven and earth inside of us. Now, granted, there may be the occasional overcast day caused by clouds of doubt and despair that may temporarily obscure the rays of the soul from reaching us on earth. But once we've established a resonant relationship and fully entered into it, the relationship with our essential self, there is always sufficient light and energy to keep us going, even in the darkest of days. So let's say a few words about this rainbow bridge. It's been referred to throughout the ages in different cultures. For instance, if you go back to the Old Testament, there is a phrase there that says, "The rainbow is a covenant twixt you and me," or between you and me. So the Bible says a rainbow is a connection between heaven and earth. This multicolored bridge is a line of communication that connects our earthly self with our divine self, because the me referred to in the Bible, between you and me, is not only the omnipotent deity who is God transcendent, but it is also the God within, the God immanent, the God that lives at the heart of who we are. And if you want to take another biblical reference to this connecting bridge, if you go back to what Jacob described, we're told that he put his head on a stone, fell asleep, had a dream of a ladder going up into the heavens. And this subtle bridge with its various rungs of ascent is called Jacob's ladder. What I'd like to do is to show you William Blake's rendition of Jacob's ladder. I find it very, very inspiring. Here it is. Why don't we just look at it for a while, because this is William Blake's rendition of Jacob's ladder, this ascending spiral from heaven to earth. And it's said that the journey we're on of evolution is a spiral journey. Because when you move with a purpose in life, you move upwards and you break the circle. And the circle then becomes the spiral. So the ladder that Jacob described in the Bible was rendered by Blake as this ascending staircase. Where else was the rainbow bridge mentioned? If you go back to Nordic mythology, the bridge is called Bifrost, and it spans from Midgård, which is Middle-earth, where we live, up to Asgård, where the gods reside. So even in Nordic mythology, you have this bridge between heaven and earth. Then I remember as a child the Celtic myth that there was a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and I know several of the children in our street would always run around when it was a rainbow trying to find the pot of gold. And I later discovered that the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is not an abundant treasure of precious metal, but actually the gold of the soul. It's called Solomon's gold, the gold of wisdom. So this gold is the gift of love and wisdom that awaits us at the rainbow's end and at the completion of our spiritual treasure hunt. So we've said that the building of this rainbow bridge is important so that the light of the soul can flow to earth now, because it is a time when all souls on deck. It's said that the soul is in constant meditation. It's always present, just like the sun in the sky, it's always shining. But we as personalities are not always in touch. We can't always see the sun and access its power. So how do we get in touch with it? How do we open ourselves to receive the sun? How do we build a bridge so the light can reach us? I'm going to use a very simple analogy from nature. If I went the meditation Mount Gardens, I noticed that the flowers are wise enough to turn their faces towards the sun to track, receive, and absorb life-giving energy. And I was thinking, maybe in our spiritual request, it requires that you and I do the same, that we also develop similar heliotropic tendencies, and we turn our faces towards the shining countenance of the soul, which is the inner spiritual sun. Otherwise, we can't receive the generous gifts of its warmth, illumination, and limitless power. So the rainbow bridge that connects the subtle and temporal aspects of our personal universe of self needs to be constructed with refined substance in order to transport the higher energies. You can't just build this bridge with any materials. So we are learning to engineer this bridge to the inner sun, and we do it each day by invoking and embodying the qualities of soul through all that we think, say, and do. And by embodying the qualities of the soul, we begin to produce the requisite building materials. I also look at Dharana, this rainbow bridge, like a suspension bridge between two states of consciousness that relies on connected cables. And these connecting cables are made from the finest materials available within us. So where do the materials come from? Well, we spin the vital threads that make up these cables with the tensile and tender substance of our own being. Tensile and tender. It's both hard and soft, resilient and surrendering. And I like to think of this weaving like a spider weaving a web from the threads contained inside itself. Because when you've watched a spider weave its web out of the substance of its own creation, you've noticed it doesn't have a coiled up rope or coiled up threads on its back. The thread comes from inside itself. And that for me is the secret to building the rainbow bridge. I have to construct from my own consciousness and substance the threads that are going to form this cable, this connective tissue between the two states of consciousness. And these two states that have to be bridged, you can look at them as the span that connects the lower and higher mind, my earthly and heavenly counterparts. The fact is that nobody else can build our rainbow bridge. We have to do it ourselves. It's our task, it's our personal responsibility, which is why each one of us is experiencing incarnation by incarnation the painstaking yet rewarding process of treading the path of evolution and service in order to develop and refine the needed qualities and characteristics of the soul. So we talked about this compelling call. The compelling call that we hear inside our heart is to live a life full of soul qualities and to comport ourselves in a way that ensures that we are living in integrity with our inner nature. So the whole thrust of the human evolution is to develop an instrument that can express on the outside the refined nature that lives on the inside. So refining and embodying these qualities in daily life is how we raise the frequency of our atoms. Because every quality has frequency. Let's think of love or compassion. Let's take compassion. Compassion has a color. It has a perfume. It has a specific note. It has a frequency. So the reason we develop and seek to embody these qualities is because we want their refined frequencies to come alive in us. Because the rainbow bridge has to be built of very refined matter. Because the threads used in the rainbow bridge cannot be coarse and rough. They must be the pure externalization of our most refined thoughts and feelings. And it's said that we build the bridge from both ends at the same time. We build it from the upper end and from the lower end. So let's take a look at both ends. At the terrestrial end, where we here are incarnated on Earth, the building of the bridge means that we have to face all the stuff in ourselves that really isn't up to standard, that isn't up to code, that doesn't measure up. It's not going to be good enough to ensure the structural integrity of the bridge. And this is what I believe all of us are involved in at the moment, the task of transmuting and redeeming the karmic consequences of our prior actions. And so this is an alchemical process that we are engaged in every day. It includes the process of acknowledging, accepting, and then transforming all those patterns. Now, a pattern can be a physical pattern, emotional pattern, or a mental pattern. It's a pattern that continues to distort the soul's signal, or may even block the signal from reaching Earth. So what I'm learning, and I'm not sure if it's the same for you. The challenge of being incarnated is to be fully immersed in life without being attached to matter or negatively conditioned by its lower frequency. Now, if you're a student of Sanskrit or the Vedic tradition, you know that the word quality doesn't carry the same meaning that it does in our tradition. In Sanskrit, the qualities are called tamas, T-A-M-A-S, rajas, R-A-J-A-S, and sattva, S-A-T-T-V-A. And tamas refers to inertia. Rajas refer to the quality of motion, and sattva is the quality of rhythm. So tamas, or inertia, means inaction, and it has a low earthbound frequency. Rajas means motion that alternates between light and darkness. And sattva is rhythmic motion and radioactivity. I find this word really interesting. It's named as containing radioactivity because I believe in the end, the final expression of the liberated soul is the release of the light within the atoms of matter, when matter becomes radioactive and releases the power within it. And this is what happens to a saint. We see historically, they become radiant, they have a gloria, they have an aura around them, they transmit the light of the soul. So part of the shift from being a human and moving into the fifth realm, the realm of the soul, is to release the light that's locked up in the atoms of our being. So simply stated, once the light of the soul is harnessed and begins to emanate through all that we do each day, then we in turn become a source of illumination and encouragement for those around us. Now, I'm going to be repeating myself several times. It's not a sign of senility. It's just I like to take these very powerful, simple statements and then look at them through slightly different angles. So I'm going to say, by seeking to live the qualities of the soul, such as compassion, joy, and gratitude, and by responding to the compelling call to serve the common good, we shift our focus and point of reference from the material world of forms to that of the subtle realm of the indwelling life. It doesn't mean that we abandon Earth and we run away. It means that our point of reference, our locus, our identity is on the inside. And our task then is to reveal the inside on the outside. And when this radical reorientation occurs, we become causal and generative and not merely reactive. Becoming causal means becoming full of the light of the soul because it causes things to happen. It causes light to happen. It causes the warmth of love to happen. It's regenerative. So the soul-infused personality that we are striving towards is like the sun. And we are attempting to create an inner state that radiates unconditionally the light of our soul. So through daily practice, through discrimination or discernment, we can discover the different characteristics of the three qualities. And then we can learn how best to build a lighted temple of our house with these building materials, how to weave the threads together and use the threads to create the cables for the suspension bridge that is the rainbow bridge between heaven and earth. So in the Agni Yoga teaching, we are always encouraged to test all useful qualities by putting them into daily practice. For example, if you believe you have patience, if patience is in fact a quality and a divine quality, then ask yourself, how do you react or respond while stuck in traffic and late for a meeting? What does patience really mean? What I've come to in my life is patience means the holding of intent over time without being troubled by or being attached to any outcome or any outer circumstances. So it's holding the intent of I'm going to a meeting. I will arrive at the right time, and not to get impatient and irritated, because all that does is to create inflammation inside my being. And then Agni Yoga says, and so does the teachings of the Alice Bailey books, that at the end of the day, you can do an evening review and you can ask yourself, how did I do today? And what you normally do is you start from sitting down where you are in the evening and you go back over your day to when you woke up. And you look at what energy did I release? What did I put into the world? And from the perspective of the soul acting as if, you ask yourself, how will I do this differently tomorrow, now that I know what changes are needed? So the more that we're aware of what's happening, the more we can be compassionate, loving, and kind. And this way, we're able to refine the substance of our being. You cannot build the rainbow bridge without working on yourself, without being part of this ever-evolving and expanding ecosystem of life. That's what I've found out. There are many years where you try to avoid things, you try to avoid facing up to things, but in the end, you can run, but you can't hide. And what you face in the end in your shadow is yourself. It's the light of yourself that's still locked up in the matter of these patterns. And dancing with the shadow is the dance that we have to do, an alchemical dance to release the light that is locked up. And this is how we build the rainbow bridge. So I find it really useful every now and again to strengthen the sense reality and the inner knowing of the soul by repeating a soul affirmation. And here at Meditation Mount, we have several soul affirmations, and I'm going to go through 3 of them with you today. And the one I'm going to present now is actually Dr. Roberto Assagioli's favorite. Dr. Roberto Assagioli, as you know, if you've been on these broadcasts before, was the inspiration behind Meditation Mount and the founder of the spiritual psychology called psychosynthesis. So what I'd like to do is the affirmation of the soul that we use here at Meditation Mount, and I want us to do it together. It's not just something you read, it's something that you sense and things happen inside of you. So feel it as well as hear it. More radiant than the sun, purer than the snow, subtler than the ether is the self, the spirit within my heart. I am that self am I. And sense the shift inside of you as you say these words. And the last 2 lines I want to explore. I am that self am I. We use the words I am a lot. I am tired, I am happy, I am sad, I am late, I am this, I am that. When we say I am the soul, it actually affirms an inner reality. Whereas when I say I am tired, it may reflect how I believe I'm feeling at the moment, but it also conditions and locks me into a state of tiredness. So the uttering of these 2 words, I am, is really important. What follows them is incredibly important. And therefore, the reason we use the affirmations of the soul is so that we affirm the truth of who we are, the essential divinity that lives inside of us. And so this essential divinity then becomes our focus, our reality. Now we're going to look at some techniques of how to build the rainbow bridge. I'm not going to go into too much depth. We're going to look at one technique. And really, I'd like to say that the work of building the rainbow bridge is the work of the white magician. whose intent is to release the power of the soul into the world as a force for good. A black magician is usually described as a person who harnesses the power of the elements in order to serve themselves and to stand in the way of the liberation of other souls. The work of the white magician is not only to liberate the power of their own soul, but to create conditions where each person can be liberated. Freedom. So freedom is a key word. And we're free to build this rainbow bridge. But in order to build it in the most sure way, the Ageless Wisdom teaching requires us to be in resonance with some of its deep principles around creation. Because when we're in resonance with its principles, we can function harmoniously as its co-creative agents in time, space, and substance. So I'd like to look at these requirements. They are called the acceptances, not the beliefs, the acceptances. And I'd like to go over 4 acceptances that are taken from the Trans-Himalayan wisdom tradition, which is part of the Mounts lineage. So I'd like to review them together now. Let me read them, and then let's stop and unpack them. There is one all-inclusive, powerful principle, life, being, existence, intelligence, God. It basically says there is one life. And those of you who are familiar with the Theosophical Society know that they have 2 postulates at the core of their work. And the first one is there is one boundless, immutable principle. So it's the same as this. It's basically saying we're part of one life. It's a great mystery. We may not understand it, but we accept that we are part of one life. The second acceptance that makes it easier for us to work as co-creative agents of the soul is accepting there is a law of rebirth or cyclic return. Reincarnation is a fact. Just as the same way in nature you have seasons of growth. For a flower to come to its maturation. So you have seasons of growth called incarnations for the soul to build up on earth its body so finally it can flower and reveal on earth the beauty that is always contained, always has been contained in its soul state. So the law of rebirth or cyclic return is an acceptance that is required in order to work with the greater life. If we're going to be microcosmic agents of the macrocosm, then the Ageless Wisdom teaching says that we have to be lined up with the principles. Now, it may sound as though you have to believe in this, but as we always say, don't believe a word that I'm saying or anybody says unless it resonates in your heart. So these acceptances are acceptances that you say yes to because they resonate, not because somebody coerces you or says you have to. The acceptance is just as I do when I see something in myself, a pattern that needs to be worked on. I acknowledge it, then I accept, yes, it is mine. So these acceptances are the spiritual version of that. I accept them because it resonates in my heart. So the third acceptance is there is a law of cause and effect, or karma. And we've often said on our broadcasts here that karma is not a punishment. It is, in fact, this gracious space, this classroom that allows us to learn the lessons of life, to finally graduate. So without the classroom, we wouldn't be able to learn. And the law of cause and effect basically says we reap what we sow. It's how we learn. It's not a punishment. It's a mirroring back of here are the consequences of your actions. Check them. Are they in integrity with your inner core? And life by life, day by day, we can bring ourselves into alignment. So the law of cause and effect and the law of karma are the ways in which we learn the lessons inside of Classroom Earth. And then the fourth and final acceptance is there is a law of unification on the path of return. All souls are unified in the one soul of humanity. So it affirms that we are part of a unified field. We're not talking about a unified field theory. We're talking about a unified field fact. The principle of unanimity, the one life. And we're on this path of return. And as things return, as Teilhard de Chardin said, everything that ascends converges. It's the many coming back to remember themselves as the one. The dismembered parts of our one humanity being pieced together, piece by piece, member by member. We are remembering ourselves, not just cognitively, but we are putting ourselves back together, heart by heart, person by person. And therefore, even though sometimes it may feel that you and I are separate individuals, on the inside, at our deepest level, all souls are unified in the one soul of humanity. So I wanted to present those 4 acceptances because I believe by accepting them in our heart, when they ring true, we're able to work with the rhythms and the principles of life as we go about our business. So let's take another step together here. As we're beginning to understand, becoming a soul-centered solar presence requires that we go through a radical process of transformation and not merely a cosmetic change where the outer form is simply painted and polished. Now let me give you an example that I like to use for myself. I remind myself, cosmic change or cosmetic change is like sticking a couple of wings on the back of a caterpillar and unconvincingly calling it a butterfly. It's not a butterfly. It's a caterpillar with 2 wings. You may think that you've changed the caterpillar into a butterfly by a cosmetic change, but it's not. So what we're describing here for each of us, we are part of this deep alchemical journey. We're describing a process of profound change that only occurs once the old forms break down and dissolve. So back to our friend the butterfly. The caterpillar goes through a natural transformational process which begins by it morphing into the pupa and entering a state of total dissolution of its old form. Total dissolution. And then inside the container, there's this new green soup phase. And we've been told that inside this green soup, there are imaginal cells that carry the pattern and promise of the butterfly. And in fact, these cells were already present in the caterpillar and are now alive and expectant inside the green soup. And they guaranteed that the soon-to-emerge form of the butterfly will reflect and resemble the original promise hidden in the secret heart of its essential nature. Symbolically, the butterfly represents the liberated spirit, the freedom of our soul to give of its radiant gifts after undergoing radical dissolution and resolution or resolution. So you could say that inside of our humanity are the imaginal cells of our spiritual nature. And we have to go through this radical transformation, this dissolution, this letting go of the form, this regeneration, in order for the butterfly that is the soul to emerge. So I'd like to look at how we work from both ends. We said the terrestrial end is working on the shadow aspects, working on liberating the patterns that hold us back, that block the light of the sun, that block the light of the soul. I'd like to look at how we can also work from the inner end, the upper end, the higher vibrating end. And to do that, I want to take us through 2 affirmations of the soul. And we'll go through these not just as a way of reading them and commenting on them, but use them as a way of invoking the soul now. So that's what I'd like us to do. So here's an affirmation that I often use. I've used it over the years because it does something that I find very synthetic. It acknowledges the three aspects of my being: spirit, soul, and personality. So let me read it, and as I do, sense into yourself how it resonates and what it means to you. I am the soul, at one with the overlighting solar angel, seeking to express the life of the monad through the integrated and soul-infused personality. So once again, it's a declaration: I am the soul. Now, there are some words in here that you may not be familiar with, and we're not going to take time to go into them. But for instance, I am the soul at one with the overlighting solar angel. It's said that there are a group of angels, solar angels, who are accompanying us on the path. Until we have released the light of our own soul, they walk with us. It's like being walked to school until you're old enough to walk by yourself. So these solar angels are with us. And the soul is always seeking to express the life of the monad. That is the spirit. That is the highest fire inside us. And the highest fire lives in the fireplace of the soul. And the idea is to bring this fire to earth. And it can only do that by having a fireplace on earth. And the fireplace on earth to receive the fire of spirit and the fire of the soul is an integrated and soul-infused personality. That's the chalice, that's the fireplace, that's the hearth. So the reason we use these affirmations is not just sort of give us courage and make us feel good. It actually does the subtle work of constructing and affirming the inner reality that we need to create. So I am the soul, at one with the overlighting solar angel, seeking to express the life of the monad through the integrated and soul-infused personality. That's my package, the 3-in-1, spirit, soul, personality, the full spectrum Michael. That's what will take incarnation after incarnation to refine and perfect. And these affirmations are there to remind us of who we are, of our essential nature. Because sometimes it's easy to forget. We get disheartened. So I'd like to move to the third and final affirmation of the soul. Five simple lines, all beginning with I am. So let's say them together. I am the soul. I am the light divine. I am love. I am will. I am fixed design. And when we say this I am statement and we sound it in our heart and it resonates as true, it's not just a confirmation for us. It actually raises the frequencies of our atoms. And the other thing it does, it unleashes a discharge of fire from the inner. And it's like a vortex descends. And when we use an affirmation of the soul, the descending vortex of fiery energy from the inner life actually agitates the elements of our personality. It agitates them, it stirs them up, and it actually amplifies the process of purification and refinement. So this is how you build from both ends. You do the work of working on yourself, getting the relationship with yourself and others clean. And you also work on releasing and invoking and affirming the fire of the truth of who you are at the same time. So I wanted to just use this final one here to show how powerful this can be. And once again, realize that energy follows thought. And everything we think and say comes into being. Which is why, as we said many times in the ancient mystery schools, you had to be silent for the first year or two, because it would be dangerous to speak out of turn, to speak when you weren't wise enough. You would cause more harm than good. So just let's reflect a moment on how that feels. I just want to reiterate, employing a potent formula such as the last affirmation, we actually do release this powerful vortex of energy. And it does cause things to get stirred up. That's why when you say yes to life, when you say yes to the soul, everything doesn't just calm down, everything's wonderful. Everything gets stirred up because the soul says, I am ready, and the personality says, I need to get ready. And that's the process. We're being called to order by the soul. So that's what it means to work from both ends. So we are being invited to undergo a radical reconfiguration of our lives. It's a recycling and an upcycling of our atoms. So as we grow and as we ascend that spiral staircase of William Blake's rendition of Jacob's Ladder, the frequency of our atoms becomes more refined until we become radioactive, until matter is no longer solid. It releases the light inside it. And occultly, matter is called black light. So the whole of this alchemical process is to shift it from the black light of hidden light in matter to the radioactive release of the light in matter, or the release of love inside the heart, the release of light inside the soul. And that is, if you like, the mystery of crucifixion and resurrection, which we've touched on in other podcasts and other View from the Mounts. So let me just begin to wrap this up. The radical shift is taking place at both a personal and collective level, and we can engage in creating a brighter future through understanding that inside the heart of humanity there are imaginal cells that contain what the Greeks called the Holy Trinity of truth, goodness, and beauty. They've always lived inside the collective heart of our humanity. And in fact, these imaginal cells of truth, goodness, and beauty are the guarantee that in the end, no matter how dark it may seem now, we will be able to grow a new level of consciousness. We will be able to grow a capacity to construct and birth a new society that delivers fully on the deep promise of this ancient trinity of attributes. So at Meditation Mount, we are constantly tuning into the imaginal cells that permeate and suffuse the one soul of humanity. And we use the practice of creative meditation, which is the power of focus group thought, imagination, and a loving and caring heart. We use that to fashion the memes, the spiritual architecture of this preferred and promised future. So this really is the heart and soul of our mission in the world. So let me bring this to a close by asking some questions. And I invite us to dream into the future and imagine a world where truth, goodness, and beauty are present, are externalized. Here's the question. What kind of world will flower when we acknowledge that each person and each aspect of creation contains a spark of the Creator, affirming that all life is sacred and is therefore to be honored and respected? This is the manifestation of the principle of essential divinity. Second question. What new model of right living will emerge when love flows freely throughout our lives, duly demonstrating that this eternal presence is the lifeblood and the true currency of all our relationships? It's also the glue that holds everything together. So the question is, can we imagine together a world where cooperation and not competition is the dominant behavior? And this power comes from the principle of goodwill in action. And the third and final question for this evening, What will it be like to live in a society where everything and everyone is perceived and held to be an integral, intimate, and interdependent part of one seamless web of life? The unified field fact. And this is the assertion, the principle of unanimity. So here at Meditation Mount, we work with these three principles. The principle of essential divinity that says God lives inside us and is calling, the God outside is calling to the God inside for us to be revealed, for the soul to be revealed on earth. The principle of goodwill, which is the release of love and the urge of the soul to do good. And the principle of unanimity, which is a recognition that we belong to one ecosystem. So our spiritual task is really create the conducive conditions on earth where the light of the soul can be revealed. I believe we're moving into an age of revelation. Not revelation by somebody standing up and proclaiming their truth and asking you to believe in it, but revelation in the manner that we see it as the falling away of the veils of illusion and ignorance that hide the true face of our inner sun. So revelation is a removing of that which stands between us and the light of truth. So the age of revelation is the age of the soul. And the final words for this evening, I'd like to quote from Teilhard de Chardin, because I think he sums up the momentous opportunity facing us at this pivotal period of history, moving from Kali Yuga to Kali Satya. Because we are at the threshold of becoming a solar civilization. And this is what Teilhard said. The day will come when, after harnessing the ether, the winds, the tides, gravitation, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And on that day, for the second time in the history of the world, humanity will have discovered fire. So the inner sun that radiates this fire of love constitutes the atomic nucleus and central core of our essential nature. What lives inside of you, me, everyone. And when activated and liberated, it shines forth as the radiant heart. And igniting and releasing this fire actually requires that the rainbow bridge is firmly in place. There is a connection between heaven and earth so that this fire has a place to move along and into the earth. So building the rainbow bridge is how we create the space to connect with the soul and the personality, but also how the light and love and power of the soul is released on earth as a saving force. Because the rainbow bridge is really a bridge of revelation of the soul. So I know I've used a lot of words, and it's a complex and yet simple approach. We are here to release the light and love of the soul on earth, to be like the sun, to give of our light and our warmth and ask nothing in return. That's what it means to serve. So let's take a few deep breaths and assimilate all the things that we've partaken of on today's journey. And be aware, has anything changed inside of you, how you feel about your own life? Any more questions? Just take note of those and continue to ponder on them. So, thank you so much for your presence and participation. And let me add another P, and patience. May we show up each day as this radiant solar presence. May we bring illumination and warmth to a world in need. So on behalf of the whole stewardship team here at Meditation Mount, deep gratitude and blessings to each of you for saying yes to life and for responding to the call of the soul. So we wish you all a very good night from this center of light, perched above the eastern end of the Ojai Valley. Good night and namaste.